Hi, I'm Shariba. Welcome to the last webinar of the Business Continuity and Recovery webinar series. Esri's business team has been hosting this series to share resources and workflows that can help your organization leverage location intelligence to overcome the unprecedented business challenges experienced during COVID-19. If you missed one or more of our earlier webinars, not a problem. The recordings will be made available for you to view and share on our Business Continuity and Recovery overview page in the days ahead. We'll provide directions to this page shortly. Assess business risks and disruptions is being recorded. The recording will be made available to you within just a few hours following this webinar. As time permits, we will answer questions at the end of the webinar. Please enter your questions into the question dialog box as shown here. You can enter questions at any time during the webinar. Also shown here, we've uploaded a PDF document that's located in the console of the session under handouts for you to download and reference later. This document includes links to materials and resources that will be covered in the webinar, including the link to our Business Continuity and Recovery overview page, which in the days following today will be your destination to listen to all recordings in this webinar series. Joining me today is Alex Martinek, Industry Solutions Specialist for Risk Management, Russell Sands, Senior Solution Engineer for Insurance and Risk Management, and John Hendrickson, Commercial Solution Engineer. We've got a lot to share with you, so let's jump right in. Allow me to introduce you to my colleague, Alex Martinek.
Thank you, Cherie, and welcome to all of you who are joining us today, whether live or via the recording. We have quite a bit to get through, so I'm just going to jump right in. And as you've undoubtedly noticed, our world looks a lot different today than it did at the start of 2020. And I don't need to go into all of the specifics of how COVID-19 has impacted our society from an economic or health perspective. But I do want to share how we at Esri have helped empower the work of our users to enhance their business continuity and recovery efforts. We've developed workflows to help ensure that customer-facing organizations, whether they are government agencies providing civil services and utilities, or businesses in the private sector, how they can maintain critical operations during periods of volatility by maximizing workforce capacity and facility readiness, by ensuring that their supply networks are more resilient, by understanding and prioritizing markets for business recovery efforts, and finally, by streamlining communication to key stakeholders. We've developed these capabilities to aid our users in their assessment of risk across the entire enterprise. And it's this last part that's going to be the topic of discussion today. We're going to be looking at how customer-facing organizations can embrace locational technologies and policies to tame business risks in periods of increasing volatility. This is important not only as we continue to respond and recover from the impacts of COVID-19, but also to prepare for a world of increasingly costly business disruptions. Today, the focus is the virus, but for the past 10 years, we've seen a clear trend of growing volatilities from natural disasters, human conflict, political and economic uncertainty. And what we've seen time and time again is that organizations who do not have a robust risk management strategy are left behind. Business disruptions are increasing, not only in their frequency, but also in their severity. It's easy to feel like in today's climate, there's a never-ending barrage of natural disasters occurring somewhere in the world. And with globalization, this has certainly increased as the exposure to individual brands and organizations has grown. These disruptions are also increasingly complex in nature. And as we've seen from COVID-19, organizations will need to continually respond to unprecedented or previously unthought of scenarios. If you get anything from today's talk, let it be this. Organizations need to have the same respect for business resilience and risk management strategies that they do for any profit-driven or growth-oriented business strategy. The time for viewing risk mitigation as just a cost center is over. These disruptions are no longer just inconveniences to the bottom line. They can completely halt your operations. Now, You may be asking yourself that given all these challenges, what is it that I can do? And as we talk about business resilience, I want to stress that this does not mean avoiding or preventing every type of disruption. That is virtually impossible. Rather, how do you proactively identify the risks that are likely to impact your operations while ensuring you have a solid strategy that enables you to, first of all, proactively identify and measure realized risks facing your organization at scale, knowing and having that understanding of what regions or business sites have the most exposure to a particular type of risk. Secondly, having the ability to continuously monitor the status of your employees, your sites, your markets, and your networks alike to reduce the time it takes from identifying an emerging situation to that action. Because lastly, it's those early stages of a business disruption that are the key to minimizing or mitigating the damage or cost to your organization. So having that ability to reduce that time between discovery and decision making when a business disruption is first emerging is absolutely key. And this is what organizations have been working with us on, from government agencies to Fortune 1000 companies, for quite some time. We've leveraged location intelligence time and time again with organizations like the Bass Pro Shops, who have set a new standard for maintaining situational awareness during a volatile situation. They did this by leveraging smart maps and apps to better understand the impact, in this case of COVID-19, on a community level. And I'm truly humbled to see the work they've done and how fast the company was able to transform their operations using these locational insights. We've attached, as Sheree mentioned, a link to the case study in a PDF handout on your GoToWebinar dashboard, and I highly encourage you to check out more about this story. What we've done with organizations like Bass Pro Shops and others boils down to assessing and monitoring the risks that will likely impact your core operations, holistically understanding how and where you are likely to be affected. In a moment, I'm going to turn things over to my colleagues, John and Russell, who are going to walk you through how to reposition your risk management strategies to first begin to maintain unparalleled operational awareness, doing this by centralizing authoritative information from disparate data sources and using web apps and applications, mobile surveys, to bring that into a single situational view. Second, having that ability to, on a very granular level, monitor real-time feeds to quickly discover and triage the situation when this disruptive type of event is first emerging. Next, how do you proactively assess and analyze those realized risks to your organization at scale across multiple geographies, time zones, different regions? Lastly, we're going to end with showing you how you can elevate your response strategies by conducting in-depth analyses of multiple threats at a time and produce custom risk scores. With that, John, let's show everyone what we have for them today.
Thanks, Alex. So first off, let's start where we can find some resources specific to COVID-19. And what we'll do is we'll go to Esri.com, and right there on the homepage, we've got this Get Resources link. It'll take us to an overview section where we talk about different topics that help you respond, maintain continuity, and reopen your businesses. We've got examples of how people have used the data. We've deployed it in dashboards like Johns Hopkins University. Companies have made data available like IHME that helps predict the projected peaks across the world. We've got examples of how people have used infographics to share hyper-local characteristics around an area, and then a gallery of much, much more. There are also examples of multiple data sets, different apps, ways that you can learn to use the technology and apply it to the current and future times, and then various solutions that people are able to deploy for specific needs. Specific to the business continuity and recovery, we've got the overview page here, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with. We talk about ways people are able to protect, stabilize, and reestablish their business, and we highlight those across the webinar series that we've been conducting, with areas such as workforce capacity, facility status, business recovery, supply network resilience, and then communicating that through things like Hub. We've also got links to the webinars we've done and a place for you to discover those recordings later on. Ending off here, we can look at the resources tab, where again, we expose you to multiple data sets that may become available, different applications and dashboards that our customers are creating and sharing for everyone to use, and the solutions and training for you to continue to develop as you go. These are constantly being updated, so I highly encourage you to keep checking this as much as possible. Let's take a look at something you're probably very familiar with already, and that's the Johns Hopkins University dashboard. This is a great way for companies to get a grasp on what's happening around the world related to COVID-19. We can see right away cumulative confirmed cases across the globe. We can understand in the various lists and widgets along the side how those are spread, where they're happening the most, and then we can click through the various tabs to see where the current highest active cases are, or where we're seeing the incident rates and the different metrics along the bottom here. This is very valuable information, and a lot of people have used this to make decisions off already. But how do you use this in your own business? Well, a lot of companies have started something like this. We have what we call a business resiliency explorer. First thing you would want to do is digitize or enable your facilities, your business locations on the map. And you can do that with a spreadsheet, or if you already have GIS information available, you can add that to a map. We can see right away we've got this categorized based on its operational status. So we can see if something is operating, threatened, or impacted. And I could update that in this web application right here. And I may use certain pieces of information to do that. Along the side, I've got some major buckets of content that are important to me to maintain and monitor as it goes. I can see various things such as storm reports, or even weather warnings and watches that would help me make decisions. Maybe I would want to reach out to a facility or a location and make sure that their operations are able to continue. And with that, we can actually use something like Survey 123 to send out a survey to each one of those locations. You may notice down here where we have a hurricane coming across Florida. When I turned on those operational assessment surveys layer, it's actually showing me information that is coming in from those sites. I can send those directly from this map by clicking on a facility, going in there and getting the details about it. I can click a link, send that email out, and begin to gather information to make decisions on. I've got other options inside of this application as well. And what you will see right now is I don't have anything specific to COVID-19. That's because nobody really saw that coming, and we weren't really having that as a predetermined layer. But that's okay. I've got the flexibility in this application to be able to come in here to this add data option. I can search for COVID-19 content, and it's going to search the ArcGIS Online repository of all that information that was on the resources page earlier. And maybe I want to start by adding those COVID-19 cases from Johns Hopkins University to allow me to interact and start to understand where there are areas that I need to start following up on, or get more information on how things are doing. Very valuable to my organization. I can also go in here and create a report by drawing an area on the map, and it will give me the ability to take that out and give it to others as needed. I can do that by just drawing or selecting an area. You can start there, and I can see right away I've got 39 facilities that are intersecting that. I could print that or download it and share it with others in my organization. But how do we start to do this in kind of a more real-time scenario? Well, using the different technology that ArcGIS provides, we can use the real-time engines behind the scenes to wire this up. And what you'll see right now is an operations dashboard. This is specific to a supply network, but it could be specific to anything else. I can see right away there are flashing dots on the map, and I know that those are something that I need to pay attention to. And that's because the technology behind the scenes is evaluating the location of my business facilities in relation to a potential threat. In this case, along the bottom here, you'll see content from the Living Atlas and some of our third-party providers. Right now, I can see if there were hurricanes available, they would be listed. We've got earthquakes showing in this list as well. And then one of our third-party partners, Global Instant Map, is making available different incidents across the world from a wide variety of cases. And we'll look at that in more detail. I can see right now very quickly metrics that are telling me what could be potentially impacted on my business. In this case, again, it's an automotive manufacturer. So there's 12% of a fastener supply affected, and so on down the road. I can click over to see a list of each one of these that are potentially impacted, and I could click on those to zoom into that specific location to understand what might be that's actually impacting that location. Here I can see there's a fire that's nearby that might be impacting our ability to perform at that location. If I zoom out a little bit, the map will actually show me the area we're using to understand if there's something impacting it. I can see this light gray area around that location. Anything that intersects that will flag it as a potentially impacted location. And this is great for me in the real-time scenario to be able to be proactively reach out and maintain a resilient business. Well, let's say I want to do some reporting on this on a given period of time. For me, my managers ask for a weekly update. I need to provide them a basic breakdown of what's going on and what we've seen. And I can do that with something like Insights for GIS. I can see right away in aggregated bins across the globe that show me where we've seen a lot of incidents in relation to our business. And the darker purple it is, the more we've seen. I can begin to interact with this as well. I've got breakdowns by the different days of weeks or the time of day. Maybe I'm interested in what happened Thursday of last week or Thursday of this week. I can select that from my list. The map will update, and so will the charts along the bottom. And it will tell me what the categories were or what the threat level of those incidents were. I can also see a link chart showing me the major categories and the minor descriptions of each one of those coming through. And it tells me a few things. For the earthquakes, for example, we've seen a fair amount of earthquakes, but it also tells us how many magnitudes we've seen across the outside there. And I get a representation of what that looks like over time. I can also compare this behind in the next tab to what we've seen over a more holistic period. So I'm showing the week, but I can also relate that to what we've seen since we've been tracking this information all along. Very similar experience as what I just saw, but I'll go down here to the bottom and actually see there's the ability for me to tie a little bit more time information in. Since I've been collecting this information for multiple years, I can click on a specific year if I'm interested. These other charts will automatically update for me to see the reflection of that piece of data. And you'll notice that the months of year drastically changed for what we saw. And I've got a heat map representation of how those were spread across the area. I'm going to ask my colleague, Russell, to take us into a deeper dive of how we can apply spatial analytics to this data as well.
Thanks, John. I'm going to be walking us through how we can use some of the data that John has been showing to begin to understand the risk at our locations. What we're looking at now is a map of representing those same facilities that John was just looking at in his dashboard and in his Insights workflow inside of ArcGIS Pro. What I also have on this map is information about incidents that have occurred in the prior 24 months. If I turn that information onto my map, I start to see a little bit of the problem that John's probably encountering when he tries to understand what's happening in this data. What we see initially, even when we've made it such that the size of these locations, the size of this incident data corresponds to the threat level, is it's really hard to understand exactly what's happening and how what's happening relates to our facilities. And that's true whether I'm out at a global scale or even as I drill closer and closer into this map, it doesn't really become any easier to understand exactly what's going on. One way that we could begin to try and dive a little bit deeper would be to try and filter out some of the noise in our data. For example, there's probably a difference in what's causing this very linear pattern in the middle of the ocean and what's causing this big blob of incidents over the United States. If I turn off all of this incident data, we're going to explore just 4 of the categories that are in the global incident map information. For environmental risks, let's look at earthquakes. And in this case, it's pretty clear that earthquakes are likely a major root of that linear feature which we're seeing here. This makes sense. And I can certainly see what appears to be large areas where there's a lot of incidents occurring centered around high earthquake impact areas. But as I flip through these categories to show, for example, fires, where again, we see some information that probably isn't too surprising. There's a lot of wildfires that occur in California, but it might be somewhat surprising to see a large occurrence of them in Florida or perhaps in Spain and Portugal. For the human-related incidents like terrorism, again, we see the same problem. It's really hard to understand exactly what the pattern in this data is or what the pattern in the hazmat incidents is. We do, however, see that for the hazmat data, it appears to be concentrated in the United States. And one thing that we probably want to consider here is the degree to which these incidents are being reported, as well as other factors that might influence exactly what we're seeing in the data. But if we wanted to understand what the pattern in this hazmat data is, it's really hard to discern that from the map that we have now. And it's especially hard to discern if there's a difference between what's occurring near our facilities in Los Angeles and our facilities in Chicago or Miami. And one thing, like John has shown, that many organizations do to begin to see through this noise and begin to gather information is to bin that data up spatially. We can look at that in some binned data that I've got on my map now. When I turn on the bins for my incident data instead of the dots, a pattern does appear to emerge. I can certainly see that in these darker orange colors, there's more incidents occurring. And at least initially, if I turn off my facilities for a moment, it appears that in California, Florida, the East Coast, and perhaps Chicago, there might be a pattern that I need to pay attention to. But stopping here is kind of a problem in a couple of important ways. And the most important thing to remember is that, as a human, we're pretty good at seeing and discerning patterns in the world and as we interact with it. But one thing that we're not necessarily good at is understanding whether there's a statistically significant pattern to what's happening in our data. Thankfully, there are tools in ArcGIS, like the ability to create hotspot analyses, that enable us to understand this in more detail. Here in red, we see statistically significant hotspots where we have high occurrences of incidents that are hazmat categories, and blue areas where there's a cold spot, meaning there's a low incidence rate. This is interesting, especially because Chicago appears to be a cool spot now. Perhaps this is related to the location of ports or shipping. And really, that's the important thing, is that running an analysis like this on my raw binned data enables me to start asking questions that would help me construct a risk surface. I could try and find factors that correlate in space and time with the incidents. And one thing that might help me to do that is if I were to look at this incident information through time. On this map that I'll turn on now, we've categorized the trend across all of our incident data such that we can see in green areas where there's a statistically significant increase in the number of events that have occurred over the 24-month period, and in purple, I should say, an area of increase, and green representing areas where there is a decrease in the trend. And this is really useful. I could append this information back to my facility data, and it would be available to users like John in their dashboard to understand about the locations we have. But what if we wanted to evaluate a new location or make a decision? That's where the ability to share this with others in my organization becomes important. What we're looking at now is a web map or a web application that's specifically designed to achieve this. I'm able to add a single location either by entering its address or coordinates, which are particularly useful for assets that might not be traditionally addressed, like cell phone towers or parking lots or depots. But I can also add a spreadsheet. So I can drag and drop a CSV into this file, and what it's going to do is parse my data. And it's going to ask me to map the fields so that it's detected that this information is a CSV of addresses. And when I submit it, I'm going to start getting information back that represent the results of the analysis that we just talked about. And it's also going to be shown alongside other risk information that my organization has. So if I look at this new potential location in College Station, I can explore the hazard score. Right away, I can see information that came out of my global incident map analysis. For the hazmat data, this didn't fall into an area that was a significant hotspot, and it's actually being called out as a cold spot for terrorism. And there's not a significant trend occurring. Perhaps most valuable is that I can combine this information, which is internal to my business, with information I'm getting elsewhere. I can get information about COVID-19 from the resources page that John has highlighted. So I can see here I have CDC's social vulnerability, information about state restrictions, as well as what the trend is at this location. This is all really important if we think not about the context of opening a new facility, but these could very well be existing stores that we're interested in reopening. I could also compare that to information about monthly unemployment, median home value, or other demographic information at the zip code level. For example, the total population or the population density. And hopefully this begins to paint a complete picture or a more complete picture of how you can use location to understand, monitor, and manage the risk to your organization. I'm going to turn it back to Alex, who's going to talk us through a couple of quick examples of other ways that organizations are managing risk with location.
Thank you very much, Russell. And I hope you all found this to be a valuable experience today. And to recap, being able to understand and maintain that operational awareness, the monitoring of real-time feeds, and then that proactive piece, which is incredibly important as we look at future events. Before we conclude today, I did want to touch on some of the emerging trends and capabilities that we're seeing, especially in light of the COVID-19 crisis. We've been engaged with our user community for quite some time now, and they all want to know, how do you leverage location intelligence to support safely reopening their business sites and facilities? One, following the recommendations of public health agencies, but secondly, how to proactively implement safeguards. Having the ability to ensure that their workspaces and common areas are configured to maximize workforce engagement and productivity, while also ensuring proper social distance measures are maintained. That ability to ahead of time identify those high-risk locations that need additional safeguards, whether they are barriers or potential signage on policies as a reminder. Anywhere where an organization, again, whether it is a government agency or a customer-facing business in the private sector, anywhere where they can prevent or minimize those potential contact events from occurring in the first place. Lastly, being able to understand these high-touch locations on a spatial and also a temporal level, to similar to what John was highlighting, with being able to look at trends over space and time. When you can look into the interior workspace, into your business sites, and understand via space and time high-touch areas, you can reallocate your sanitation and remediation efforts where they are needed, and most importantly, when they are most needed. All of this guides faster and more reliable response efforts for any potential incident, whether it is COVID or some of the other types of business disruptions that we've covered today. And again, the main thing here is that it speeds that precious time from discovery to decision making. Before we conclude, I want you to think about your current state as an organization and what your risk management strategies look like. And just a few questions to think about. Reflect back on the past couple of weeks and months with the current crisis. How do you stay up to date on your workforce wellness, your facilities capacity, and how do you maintain that operational integrity during a crisis, whether it's from a realized risk that you could expect or something that may not have been on your radar? What's your process for monitoring your operational readiness? How do you scale your strategies from macro regions to individual business sites to address very specific and hyper-local challenges? As we've seen with COVID-19, that this could be a facility-to-facility type of policy that needs to be implemented. Are you equipped to position an effective business resilience strategy, not focusing on avoiding every crisis, but being able to fulfill on your strategic operations when a crisis or business disruption occurs? Lastly, are you prepared to quickly overcome emerging or unrealized business risks before they interfere with those crucial operations? With that, I want to thank you all for sharing this time with us today. I mean this when I say I'm truly humbled to see the amazing work you have all done throughout this crisis and other crises in the past that we've worked on together. And I look forward to continuing on this great work. So with that, thank you very much for joining us today. And Cherie, I'm gonna hand it back over to you.
Awesome. Alex, Russell, and John, thanks so much for helping us to close out this series with another great presentation. Well done. To learn more about our business continuity and recovery resources and workflows that are available to your organization, please follow the link that is provided on this slide and in the handout that is also uploaded into the console of the session. It will take you to our business continuity and recovery overview page. Also, do not forget, all webinar recordings within the series will be made available for you to view and share on demand. In the days ahead, we will add the series recording to our business continuity and recovery overview page. And we are past the time, so we won't be able to take any questions live today. But as I mentioned, the webinar is recorded for you to share on demand, and you will receive an email following this webinar with contact information where we'll reach out to you directly to answer your questions along with the recording. And that is it. That's it for today. This wraps up today's webinar and our business continuity and recovery webinar series. We'll remain open for an additional 2 minutes so that you can leave any remaining questions. Again, we will get back to you individually with our answers. And thank you for joining us. Have a great day. you.